presentation is related to post-earthquake city recovery visions and their impact on city development. For using the example of the White City, or Spitak City. Sorry. In 1988, we had the devastating earthquake, which had a serious impact on the further development of the city. It destroyed all the industrial part of the industrial quarters of the city, leaving some buildings in ruins, and there was cut of power and water supply and gas supply. During those days, Spitak was at the core of international media, and they were flooded with information about the devastating earthquake in Spitak because it was the most famous among the natural disasters that happened in the last decades of the 20th century. And there was no Spitak city, there was a whole area left in ruins, burning plants, a crazy city covered with weeping mothers and running around, people looking for their relatives. There were several visions suggested for the recovery of the city, and what did the former mayor of Spitak, Mariam Avetisyan. So this is the post-earthquake picture of Spitak. There were several rounds of recovery. The first one was related to the international humanitarian aid, and it has some imprints of several countries that have provided their support. However, most of the countries provided basically the first aid, provided some tents, also medicine and food for the survivors, and then there was a need to build some shelters for the people. So different contracting companies arrived to Spitak and brought necessary raw materials in order to build those shelters. The work started without any master plan, and because of the seismic situation, it was decided to move city beyond its boundaries, so closer to the Yerevan-Spitak highway. Some of the districts have been built, and out of gratitude, people of Spitak have called them Estonian, Norwegian, Finnish, Italian, Uzbek, Swiss, etc., by the names of the countries that have supported the recovery. This is the Uzbek district of Spitak. This is the Norwegian district, actually part of the Norwegian district. The Norwegian Red Cross also funded building of Spitak hospital, and in memoria of Norwegian humanist and a friend of the Armenian nation, Fridtjof Nansen, is named after him. Then several wooden houses have been built along the highway by the Norwegian government for those doctors who will be working in Spitak hospital in order to help them to have accommodation. There were some temporary shelters which were built. So here in the Norwegian quarter, there are also 4 nuns who had arrived following the call of Mother Teresa, and they're now working in Spitak with people with disabilities mostly. It is on the outskirts of the city of Spitak, and it's not considered to be a very prestigious area. I also looked at the Swiss quarter, which was built by the Swiss people. According to the city plan, it was supposed to be the center of the new city. It was decided also to build a church here, but soon the master plan changed, so the foundation of the church is there, but the construction is left unfinished. Today in Spitak we have some specific corners of those countries as a resemblance of the support and they're named after the countries that have supported the construction. So the newly built Spitak was located at some distance from the historic city, and there is an empty space between the two cities. Of course, there are some commuters taking people to the new place, but it doesn't solve the issue because it seems that you're dealing with two separate cities. So after the earthquake, it was decided also to restore the industrial corridor in the city. It is well known that Spitak was a small industrial city with several factories during the Soviet times, and it was a decision by the national government to restore some of the factories, including the shoe factory, cheese factories in Spitak and Nalband, and two other factories. And we have also bakery, which was reopened 10 days after the earthquake in order to supply fresh bread to people. Some of the factories have been we had also the elevator factory here. The elevator factory was producing spare parts for the cargo elevators and then also for the smaller elevators. There was an agreement between the municipality of Spitak and Zangezur copper molybdenum factory, which sold this area to copper molybdenum factory, and in exchange they had to actually build a small football stadium, but nothing was done. And then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, for about 10 years or even more, all activities have stopped in Spitak. So there was no construction. People in the center of Spitak were living in small temporary shelters, so-called domiks. The situation changed when Suren Avetisyan was appointed as the mayor of Spitak city in 1996 until 1995. From 90 to 95, he was the executive director of Louis Foundation. So he provided some support to students who were going to the university using pro bono buses or commuters. He also provided free of charge transportation to the mothers of deceased soldiers. During this time, he gained some support in the city, and in 96 he received 90% of the votes in the city and was elected as the mayor. Information about Suren Avetisyan could be found from Agapi Haykazuni's book. She was a staff member. She tried to actually put together all interviews of Suren Avetisyan in one book. So all information about Suren Avetisyan is from this book. So from the book we'll learn what were the plans related to reconstruction of Spitak, what was his vision of the city. In one of the interviews on how they initiated the rebuilding of New Spitak, he answers that after seeing for 10 years all the ruins, Spitak had decided to initiate this, having in mind that no one else but people in Spitak should do that work. So the work started in 1997. He started with fundraising among the businessmen and businesswomen in Spitak, and it was soon joined also by those people from Spitak who were residing at that time in Russian Federation. One of his other interviews that we had, he said that he participated in cleaning of the city, and during the time when Suren Avetisyan was mayor, he was a student in the school. He remembers how the city was built, how the work was done. So students from the school were taken by Suren Avetisyan on Saturday to the city park, and they have cleaned because of this initiative the entire park from the waste. Then different projects have been put together with the government and with individual benefactors. And Jim Torresian, a famous Armenian architect, was tasked with development of the master plan. Papin Avetisyan, father of Suren Avetisyan, has said that he had specific priorities. So, for example, memorial complex devoted to the victims of the earthquake, church, the main square surrounded by the living quarters will compile the new image of the city. So, Suren Avetisyan had a vision. There was Baghram Street, which is now renamed after Suren Avetisyan. There are 5 similar buildings. Those should have been considered as the central gates of the city according to Suren Avetisyan's vision. He also had 15-building triangle district in the center of the city. 15 residential building triangle district. Suren Avetisyan was paying special attention to housing construction and also rehabilitation recovery of the industrial quarter. I will talk about the symbols of revival or Renaissance. There are several small monuments that Suren Avetisyan built or restored as a symbol of Spitak recovering from the earthquake. There was a monument devoted to the victims of the earthquake, 4,300 victims here. Usually a memorial ritual service is taking place on the day of the earthquake. The next one was building of the central square of the city designed by Jim Torresian. This should have been the main symbol of the recovery of the city. From 1998 interview by Jim Torresian, we learned that there was a competition on the rebuilding of the city, and Jim Torresian was one of the members of the competition board. Georg Aramian received actually the first prize for the project he presented. So then they started to also work on the design of the schools, cultural house, etc., etc. This was done right after the earthquake, but the work has stopped because of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Then Avetisyan becomes the mayor of the city, and he uses his personal links and contacts, and he brought together all his friends, including Jim Torresian, who had to put into the architectural form the ideas that Suren Avetisyan had in his mind. After the war and earthquake, after the collapse of the Soviet Union due to economic slowdown and crisis, the recovery was actually left behind, and Suren Avetisyan, knowing all this, took on initiative using his own image and reputation in order to initiate this process. According to his vision, the new square would be a place where the unique Armenian architecture would be presented. It should be should have an entrance in the form of an arc with some galleries. Behind the galleries, there was a possibility to have also some residential buildings, and uh, the first floors of those buildings should have been used for different public services, cafes, restaurants, etc. They should have had some incline in order also to host the club. The closed area should have 20 meters of height with the tree of life, a symbolic representation, and the floor should have been covered by the concrete. And it was also supposed that Spitak people will spend their leisure time here, organize some events, and from the square, the church would be visible, where they should have used stones, the gray and pink stones from the stone mine. There are some interesting stories related to the construction of Surp Harutyun, Holy Resurrection Church. The role of the church became important principle for the city, and there were some rumors that the residential building which they erected in place of the destroyed church was cursed. That's why no resident had good luck. So that's why there was a decision to build a church. It was a decision of the citizens of Spitak, and then they approached the Apostolic Church of Armenia, which actually agreed to that project. There is an interesting notion or idea linked to the new church. If the idea was to restore the old church, it should have been the Church of the Holy Mother of God. But there was also another church, iron one, built near the graveyard, which is non-functional now. So there was, which was called the Church of Holy Resurrection. That's why there was a decision made to name the new church the Church of Holy Resurrection as a symbol of recovery and renaissance of the city. It is located in the center of the city, and it is close to the square. The work started at the time when he was mayor of the city, but the construction was finished after the death of Mariam Avetisyan by different individual benefactors who supported this construction. Near that, there is also a cultural house where there are different groups. According to his vision of Mariam Avetisyan, this cultural club was for the youth of the city. Before he was elected, the mayor of the city, only 20% of the houses in Spitak were restored, and he was actually considering this to be one of the top priorities for his work. You see a wall standing after the earthquake in the central court, and he decided to keep it as it is, as a symbol of the old city. That's why it is still there. It is in the center of the city now. He also took some steps in order to reopen the sugar factory, the cane sugar factory, also the elevator factory, and dairy factory, but he unsuccessfully. He was then elected member of the Parliament of Armenia to bring this issue to the attention of the national authorities. At the same time, he kept his contacts with the villages near Spitak, trying to actually put together an itinerary of the issues they had. But unfortunately, on October 26 of 1999, there was a traffic accident that took away the life of Suren Avetisyan in the early morning of that day. So he was mayor for only 2 or 3 years, but because of the work he done for people in Spitak, people started to sanctify his image, and it is evident in the way they treated his memory. The central square was called Suren Square. This is the church which was built right after the earthquake in order to also serve as the funeral house. It is no longer functional, but it stays there as one of the symbols of the earthquake. So, another case of iconization, he is elected the chairperson of the Union of Spitak Communities. And one of the central streets, former Baghram street, is now named after Suren Avetisyan. And the last point that I would like to make, it is related to bridging the gap between the old and the new city. One of the districts is called Glendale. It is being built between the two cities, and now some attempts are being made to fill in the gap between the two cities. By the way, Glendale is the name used by the population in Spitak because this district is built by the Glendale Hills. In reality, it is called the Master's Quarter. It was planted at the center where you see the empty space. Uh, they planned to build two-story houses for artisans, artists, etc. The second floor would be their residence. On the first floor, they would have their workshops. However, this work also is unfinished, and this is the actual situation that we have now. This is Ukraine restaurant and Yanukovych Square. This speaks about the multiculturalism of the city of Spitak. Probably I will stop here. Thank you.